some of those scenes, like you don't see a cut to me because I am like mouth agape, tearing up. Everyone just crushed it. And gosh, I just lay that at the feet of a brilliant table that knew exactly how and when to press with one another and just got to such a beautiful place.
Aabria, this season is insane. And I have so much to talk to you about. But the first thing I want to talk to you about isn't even from this episode. What was the bear map, dude? That was scarring. That was terrifying. That was gorgeous. You have to tell me about that process.
Thank you. Okay, so the problem is Zoom did in fact clip out the word you yelled. So I don't know what you reacted to.
The bear battle map?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, that's right. We haven't talked
about it.
My friendly, cute little animal season got weirdly interrupted by a nasty boy bear. I have been dreaming of a map, like a fight that takes place on the inside of a living thing for so stinking long. And it was so funny when we were like first talking and like all the hype after the trailer dropped came and everyone's like, cute little stoat season, but maybe a little scary. And I was like, I don't know how to tell everyone that the second episode is the most disgusting thing I've ever done. And we were trading emails about it, like hearing that like art people in the art department were like, we have protocols if someone kind of gets nauseous while working on this. Like, it's just so nasty. And I love my little bear Polly so much. It's like a nasty Polly Pocket.
Yes, I did not get the chance to tell you. I fully had to pause and walk away for a minute because I was like, I need a minute. I cannot believe that you just did this.
I'm so sorry. It was one of those really funny things where I got a call from a friend who was like, I was eating dinner. And that's all the text said. And I was like, what is that? Oh, yeah, it's kind of an evening release. So maybe don't eat any like spaghetti for the rest of this season. It's a little gross.
Is that like your first battle map? Because I don't think you've really used them on Dimension 20 before.
So that's my first Dimension 20 battle map. Very specifically after Ravening War and seeing the cool stuff Rick in the art department made for Matt when he came in to jump back inside Caloran. I was like, okay, I really need to pop off with like some of the bigger ideas I've had for maps. I've done map stuff over on Critical Role because Matt has a giant like map room. So I was learning to build maps for EXU, which was really fun and good because normally I'm just sort of a theater of the mind kind of guy because I came into this late and was like, I can't burn all of the money I've ever had on maps, even though that's now my instinct. So yeah, it was one of those things where you're like, cool, if it's not me with a hot glue gun and some puffy paint, what is possible? And Carlos and I had like a bunch of really cool meetings where he like came over and I have a whole, you know what, when we talk again later and everything's out there, I will show you my big whiteboard because I left it, it's still up, of like the original pitches. The bear was like the original thing I pitched, as was the map from 6/7. Our sort of two-way puzzle that turns into like the ritual room that I originally asked. I was like, hey, Rick, I don't know if you would care, but maybe cut a giant hole in the table for me. And he was like, hey, no, absolutely not. It was the most deadpan thing in like this big meeting full of like, cool, and we're going to try to pull this off. And then I like tried to sneak it in. And he's like, we're not doing that. Bran, we're not gonna cut a hole in the table for you. And then I had a little bratty meltdown and I was like, I bet you would do it for Brennan. You would do it for Jasmine. Just do it for me. And he's like, no, I would tell them no also. So we're going to build something else. But anyway, it's very cool. And it's been very, very fun to sort of take the biggest idea, like trying to think about when you say, hi, we're going to hard commit to maps and minis. trying to be as like trying to push the forum a little bit about what does it mean to have an encounter map? Like, what does it mean to see a big thing that you think is the villain and then have the reveal that everything's happening on the inside? What does it mean to have this sort of like really fun puzzle with not a lot of a fight encounter on the top and have that turn into like a big final confrontation with the first oats? So it's been very, very fun. I like it so much. Sorry, I've been talking for a long time. I'm very excited.
No. I'm going to ask you a question about the map before we jump into the penultimate episode. You said that you kind of were learning maps over at Critical Role with EXU. Did you talk to Matt about this map at all, since you couldn't talk to Brennan for obvious reasons?
Yeah, it was really funny. Especially like because while we were doing all of the like pre-production for this, I was guesting as Deanna in the main campaign. And after one of the like Malayasmere episodes where everything got really gross and like very annihilation and nasty, the moment we like stopped filming, I was just like, Matt, let me talk to you for like 10 seconds because like we're working on this map. And like, yeah, definitely like there's something so beautiful about being able to pick the minds of like the greatest game runners out there to be like, so here's what I'm thinking, here's what we're working on, here's what's being built. Like, what do you see? Like, here's what I'm trying to aim for. And getting to collaborate with just sort of geniuses is a really fun side effect of getting to like work in this space. And yeah, it was agony not being able to like talk to Brennan about it, but there's always something so fun about surprising your friends with like, it feels like a science fair project of like, look at this thing I built. It's nasty and it's for you. Yuck.
I love it. By the way, I would put you up there as like one of the top GMs.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I have to talk to you about the first Stoats. And before we get into the lore and craziness of it, how did it feel for them all to die immediately?
It was so funny. Like I was sitting there and like when you play in encounters where you're like, oh, I'm expecting a lot of like lore drops too. How do I make sure that like all the lore is getting out there without, you know, dragging down the pacing of like a high tension fight? And it was so funny to come out of the gate and then just be like, and Tula goes for the what? Oh, no monologue. Oh, you're just going to stomp them. Got it. Well, interesting. Well, they're dead now. Would you like a free wolf? I guess that you could just have that now. It was so fun. I loved everything moving into the sort of like face off and this idea that this was like our big bad and this was the thing you had to face down against, these sort of like shadowy leaders that no one really understood, and it's how easy it was for our party and the audience to sort of map a bunch of like societal ills onto them because they don't have a lot of information. So it's easy to assume because they're scary and wear clothes of authority figures from the human world and have like weird teeth and are a little like nasty and bigger. It's very easy to go, those are my big bads. This is going to be a big foe. It's over. Oh, it's over. It's over. And the last things that they said to us were like, if we die, we die, but don't let last fast fall. It felt like a really fun, not like rug pull for the party, but that moment of realization at the end of this big conflict that you were like, well, there's still several more episodes in the series. So what does that mean about what these people were to the sort of arc of the story? And I like that it was sort of a fake out of a climax that you're like, no, the bad thing's coming. And now you have even less information than you thought you were going to come away with because questions weren't answered, questions weren't asked. So now they died believing something even worse than them was on the way. And you have to figure out what it is and get 20,000 stoats ready. Good luck.
This family rolled up and within 24 hours. It's like, we killed all your leaders and I guess we're in charge. And also everything you thought might be alive, but also maybe isn't.
Right? It was so funny coming in as Bennett. I was like, oh, I've got to like have someone with that perspective. Great. I'm going to poof Sybil away and we're going to bring Bennett in to have what do you mean you cast command on him upon entry? Okay, this can't be another fight, but you got to see how this looks, right? He did rock up. Sort of assume a lot, ask not as many questions as you think you did. and then kill all the leaders. And then the funniest part was the like, well, maybe we should leave. And you're like, no, you can't destabilize and then go help. So it was very fun living in the like consequence of violence instead of just lionizing the violence itself. And I think that's a thing I wanted to talk about, especially in terms of like what D&D does and what it inspires in people. Like this party has leveled several times. It is easy and very available for them to lean into their like magical abilities and their martial abilities to solve whatever problem jumps in front of them. But that doesn't solve the problem. That was an act. Solving the problem is helping this society. And it wasn't just liberating them from the first oats. It's figuring out what's going on and making the best choices in the face of an impending bigger crisis. So it was very, very fun. And the party handled it so beautifully. And I'm just so excited as we like enter into the end game to see how all of that pays off. Because there's been a lot of like pretty political themes and like interpersonal themes, but we're now getting to the point where like the family is resolving all of their stuff. And now they can kind of look to the last problem on the horizon for this story, at least.
I also am now just picturing them following Tula's advice and dipping.
Yeah, right? What if they just took off?
Like the rest of the season, them just running away.
I would laugh so hard if it was just a series of survival checks as they just run into the forest. And I'm like, okay, I guess you're done. I don't know. You guys want to have one really, really, really long adventuring party? Because I think we're out of plot.
Oh my God, that'd be hilarious. Then we got a huge lore drop. You were able to find a way to actually get all the first lore, which well done.
Thank you.
Can you talk to me a little bit about developing that? Because again, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we're coming in at the end of someone's story. This is really interesting.
I mean, yeah, there is a thing where all of that information was seeded in different ways throughout their sort of time in Last Fast. And, you know, the struggle of any like improvised story is like, I at no point want to force them to like, here, I have to give you a big heaping spoonful of lore as you're trying to figure out what you care about in your first sort of interactions in Last Fast. So I showed stuff when there were things to show, but mostly it was like interpersonal things within the family and a lot of stuff with like Sybil and Lucas. So when it came to the truth of the first stoats, they got to the big fight and didn't have a little bit of information. Of course, everything can happen without all of that lore drop happening, but it felt important to talk about how the first stoats got there in order to draw some of the parallels I was hoping the audience and the party would see between like, I don't think there's much difference between Tula's protectiveness over her family and her willingness to do tremendous violence in order to protect her children and her sister and her mother and her brother-in-law. I don't think that's any different than the feeling the first stoats had about Last Fast of being willing and capable of doing acts of great violence in order to like protect the people you care about. And I think there's something interesting to be said there within the society. So it felt like, ironically enough, humanizing the first stoats a little bit gave a little more context to not only like what's coming, but how this group of like 5 stoats got to where they are as our party, and like the plot intersects with them. And it was really fun. And I just wanted them to know a little bit more about my little girl, Phoebe. She's great.
So curious about her because I truly, like when I was taking notes for this episode, one of my things is, who is the big bad? Is it Phoebe? Is it humans in general? Is it Dr. Winnebacher, aka Dr. Winnebago?
Poor Dr. Winnebacher. Rip. But I think there's something really interesting in playing a little bit of moving the goalpost in who the big bad is. Of course, with enough information and drilling down, you can figure out like who any different faction believes the big bad is. But I don't think that there's always objectively like good and evil clearly delineated in the world. And I wanted to try to replicate a little bit of that of like, well, the people you thought were the big bads think this other thing is the big bad. And they don't know if this like secret, like variable in Phoebe, like, is Phoebe an ally to the First Oats? Is Phoebe like a MacGuffin to the human? Like, what are all of these different like levels of like power and power bases doing with one another? And who considers who a friend and an enemy and worth protecting and worth like watching? And I think that little bit of intrigue is just that nice little layer going into an end game. I don't think I answered your question at all.
Well, to be fair, my question was basically who's the big bad, so I didn't know.
You'll find out.
Can you tell me a little bit about Dr. Winnebaker though? Because like he's alive and he apparently just told everyone, no, I got attacked by people, which understandable. I don't know how you walk out of that and go 5 stoats like straight up attacked me and stuffed me in a closet. That wouldn't work.
Like poor Dr. Winnebaker. Like, what if you are a high value, like head scientist of a nuclear facility in a country that I will not define, because you can't make me do it. We will not lean into geography. And 5 weasels, but not even as big as weasels, small, like 5 extended hamsters come and absolutely run your like shit. Sorry if we can't cuss. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're like, I got to make sure no one knows that I got attacked by a bunch of rats. And for a while, I thought they won. Well, we're not going to talk about that at all. There's a whole nuclear thing happening. No one's going to worry about that. Ignore the scratches. We're fine.
I'm so curious about him because I'm like, does he want revenge on the Stoats, or is he truly just like, that was weird and moved on with his life?
It's so funny. Like, I do want to talk about this way more. Hey, why don't we have this conversation next week? Because there is just a little bit more of like a payoff there that I don't want to give away too much of. But yes, the sort of struggle of Dr. Winnebaker is very like core to the like end game of this season. But man, I think Winnebaker would have been a much milder, like little like sort of side plot point. But Carlos came in, and on top of all of his like producer duties and all the ways in which he helped, like as we were coming into pre-production and while we were filming, like he just crushed the tapes so much. Like I texted him with a weird idea and wrote a very basic script. And then what I got back was so stinking good that it definitely caused me to go back. I was like, I need to go back and like work on the story more because I think there is more to this. Like he made some additions and just elevated in a way that was like, oh, there's a little more to this. So we'll dig in and add a little more stank on this very cute scientist.
I love that. He was so great. And then
so good.
And then this kind of curtails into the next topic I want to talk about. I think what's so interesting is because we've been living in the Stoats' mind with this for so long, we're like, of course Winnebaker wants revenge. And then you take a step outside and you're like, he's a person that got attacked by a bunch of like rodents. You're not looking for revenge. You're like, that was weird. And move on to the next thing. So that's so interesting because then we had our first interaction between Stoats and humans. And into the meat of that, everyone's reaction to Rashawn going, hey girl, hey.
I have to say, like, there is just something so fun when you have people with your like cultural touchstones at the table and having another Black woman there to just have that little moment of like, you're a Stoat and I'm a guy, but you're going to say, hey girl, hey. And we're going to like, it was really fun to have that moment of like, we connected like player to player, while also in the trappings of like this very crazy situation. And I was just like, oh man, I definitely went home that day and was laughing really hard about like, what would I do if I was just out minding my business and doing my work? And like a little Stoat comes up to me and not only speaks English, but like speaks slang. Like, what if a Stoat was cool at you? And it was just the funniest thing. And everyone at the table, Rashawn especially, is just so funny and quick on their feet and can bring these moments and points of like high levity and absurdity that doesn't break the world in any way, but it does feel like a really nice like tension relief valve for a stressful season that is sliding into its endgame. It was just so good and so funny. And I'm pretty sure we had to edit out like a lot more of my laughing from the final cut because that one got me very good.
Yes, the actual watching people's jaws drop and Brennan just losing it was like, yes, I needed that moment.
It was so good. Like the ability to like surprise your friends is a thing I like. That's the high I chase. Like to make your friends laugh, to make them shocked, to make them feel something is very cool. So, the reactions were all great. That was so funny. It's so good.
So we learned that the Stoats are speaking like English or whatever human language they're speaking in wherever they're set.
Yeah.
They're speaking human, and then they interact with a human. Can you talk about getting into that headspace of a person that's straight up talking to Stoats? Because you've spent so much of the season stoatifying people things.
Yeah.
To flip that on its head.
Yeah, it felt like the really fun exercise back because so much of, not so much, but like a fun bit that I got to play with as a DM throughout the like season was doing the like, what does this normal, if I described this with normal, clear, like English words with all of their context, everyone at the table and everyone in the audience would know exactly what I was talking about. But context sets are different. Like language isn't just knowing what the words are, it's having the reference set. It's very much the like Star Trek, like Darmok and Jalad Tanagra, that idea of like metaphor and having a shared sense of like what context things have allows for language to flow easily. So after tormenting the table with that a bunch, it was really nice to like give it back to my NPC as a human going, what? Okay, I am a scientist, so I approach everything with, like it's that idea of like, this is a scientist that's coming back into an irradiated zone 20 years after a meltdown, doesn't know what to expect, is finding ways in which the woods and the like flora and fauna within it have changed markedly and monstrously. And then you meet a little stoat. And the weirdest thing of all isn't that it's somehow monstrous or hyper violent or has like weird horns or extra teeth or some like annihilation problem. It's that you meet a little creature and it's exactly as smart as you. It can have a conversation. It has memory and history and context. And I think that is in the same way that like eldritch horror is about this like unfathomable thing that you couldn't even imagine, that you couldn't even wrap your mind around. There's something terrifying, to me at least, of the idea of something that you took for granted being incredibly different in a way that like forces you to reevaluate like the sort of hierarchy of supremacy of intellect in your world, especially for a scientist for whom taxonomy of things is like the entire name of the game.
That makes me curious. Could that interaction have gone completely differently had it not been approached in such a communicative nature? Is that something where it could have been they immediately came off as a threat to these guys and it immediately turned into we have to exterminate these?
Yep. There is definitely. So there's a moment in the previous episode when we play the tapes and everyone like Brennan gets up and Erica like runs under the table and pops up behind me. I go from being very like, this is my cool horror thing, to shrieking and asking them to like stop looking. It's because I had a big flow chart that was up in a physical note because like, yeah, I have my like Google Doc and like all of my reference stuff on the computer, but some things like bigger beats, I like having just like an eye line and like a bigger font because I wear glasses. I can't see that well. So I had a big flow chart for what was going to happen with our darling scientist, Dr. Steele, depending on how the Stoats approached. And yeah, it was a little bit of a thumb on the scale towards curiosity, but that could have slipped into a threat and a deeply unfair fight if that had gone differently.
What's been the most surprising part of seeing how the table has had the Stoke family evolve throughout the season?
Coming into it, the way everyone like in our character gen had sort of built the parameters and ideas of how this family would get along. This idea of like a family that is tight-knit and loves and protects each other, but has those big problems of bad things happen external to them. And because they are not processed well, there's a like tension within the group too. So now we have multiple generations. And when we talk about generational trauma, like big shout out to Erica for making the coolest possible character. They came in and literally said, I want to play generational trauma so hard. I will be a path of the and to play an ancestral barbarian, you were like, oh, so even after death, this idea of like generations of family, like violently protecting their family, like it just became this like mythologized sense of like you don't escape the like ladder, like the rungs in the ladder of your family, and how oppressive that could feel, not just for like Tula and her kids, but also for Ava. Like she's also caught in that in the same way, and Thorne is married into it, and Viola is now engaging with it in a new way for the first time, being expected mother. So all of that was sort of table stakes as we walked in, and then giving them time and space to explore and resolve or worsen different aspects of their relationship based on like the sort of stimuli I was throwing at like towards them from the outside. How does a bear fight get you to talk a little bit more about your family trauma? It's very cool, and seeing where they are now, getting ready to hit our like finale episode. It was just such a beautiful arc of we do what we need to do, like being in that sort of like white knuckle, we just have to survive. And then you get to a place where you're like, it isn't survival if we don't resolve this. Like we can't keep pushing these conversations. We can't keep like hoping that a Band-Aid will cover the rift in our like relationships because something bigger or worse is happening. We need to deal with it now. And watching everyone move through those arcs, some of those scenes, like you don't see a cut to me because I am like mouth agape, tearing up. Everyone just crushed it. And gosh, I just lay that at the feet of a brilliant table that knew exactly how and when to press with one another and just got to such a beautiful place. They're just so good.
I completely agree. And then I'll ask one last question for this episode before we do our full big crazy breakdown.
Yeah.
Tula's been dead the whole time?
The whole time.
What inspired that?
Caitlin, I struggle. I have tried to kill Brennan in the dome so many times, and I haven't pulled it off. And I figured the only way to win was to kill him before we even started. And it was very cool that like while we were doing our character gen, when we were rolling for stats, Brennan rolled kind of poorly the second time on his do-over. And I was like, I'll give you another roll, but let me pitch something to you. And we like went outside and talked on the little staircase outside the green room. And having someone that had already been like incredibly transformed by the blue was just a really nice, like, it's nice to have like a fun little table reveal, but it also just has that stakes of like, what is the blue capable of? How sentient is it? Like, when does it choose? Why does it choose? And why Tula and not Jeffrey, which is such a beautiful thing for Brennan to sit on, that like in all of Tula's conversations, like if you go back and watch, that extra bit of context makes so much of that. It makes sense. It makes her weariness make sense. It makes her worry make sense. She knows that death is real because she has met it, and not just as a grieving widow, but herself. And I think there's something like even more fearsome in the peacefulness of her death that like, yeah, I think it explains why she is so like motivated by fear and not wanting to leave her family behind, and like the way duty like started her heart again is just so, it's so important to who Tula is as a character and a caretaker. And it was so nice to make the Revenant like the mother of young children, of just like love or revenge brings you back from the dead. Which was it and why? So it's just very cool. And then Brennan, of course, crushed it. And I think I technically get my W for having killed Brennan Lee Mulligan in the dome, sort of.
I love that, because all I'm picturing you is after Ravening War going, I didn't get to kill his radish, I'm gonna kill his stoat.
Yep. Yep. I'm gonna kill that stoat. It's also really funny that, like, kind of looking back at the last year of stories, I think I've been like circling around a lot of like thoughts about death and life in the like context of D&D, like playing Karna, that was also Revenant. Deanna has also come back from the dead. This is something that I've definitely been thinking about and sort of like trying to figure out what I want to say and what I think about telling stories in a world where you know the gods are real and the afterlife exists. And if you die, that's not forever. So what is death and how does that change who you are when the thing that we are all like fighting to avoid so hard is something that is a little bit more reversible than you think? It's a very interesting little wrinkle to add into your idea of your character as you play a game.
I cannot wait for the finale. This is easily one of my favorite seasons of Dimension 20. You were like, it's not cute. Wait, I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, I can't even be mad. She warned me.
It was so hard up top, just being like, I don't know what I can tell you because it's going to get so weird. I think if you like watch the trailer and if I was like, hey, the early comps, Secret of Nim and Watership Down are very quickly going to give way to like A Brave New World in 1984 and Animal Farm and one other comp that will be very obvious after the finale. It's just one of those things where you're like, I think you just have to like, please just trust and hold on to whatever the story is giving you and don't put too many like presuppositions onto it. And I hope everyone likes it. Because I really do. And I'm really, really proud of it. And I'm so proud of everyone, both like in front and behind the camera in pre-production and post-production and was there on the day. Everyone put their like absolute heart and soul into it and elevated it. So it's very nice that I get to sort of be a bit of the face of this season, but this season wouldn't be one of my favorite things I've ever done without everyone that like elevated and turned it from good to great. So it's very cool. I'm very happy.